Welcome to our organ video, and this is Wednesday, the 14th of April. So it's a video actually that I've been looking forward to for this throughout the length of this installation project, the last 2 or 3 months, because we've been waiting for all the hardware that is such important components of the organ console. An organ console is the control center for this amazing and somewhat complex instrument, the pipe organ. The console is always, in my mind, a little bit analogous to the cockpit of an airplane in that all the controls are brought together in one pretty small space that, to me, ever since I was a boy, has been very fascinating. And I still, to this day, see some parallels between an organ console and an airplane cockpit, and they're both, to me, equally interesting. So, at any rate, we've been waiting for the stop knobs here, these little white knobs, each of which controls a sound on the organ, each of which controls a matched set of pipes for the entire range of the keyboard or the pedal board. So, for most of these stop knobs that control stops on the manual keyboards, there's 61 pipes because there are 61 notes, 5 full octaves. So 1 octave, 2 octaves, 3 octaves, 4 octaves, 5 octaves. Of course, I didn't play the black notes, but if you count them all, there's 61 notes, 61 pipes. So most of these stop knobs control a matched set of 61 pipes. In the pedals, there are 32 pedals, and the same thing would go for pedal stops. So for instance, matched set of 32 pipes for pedal stops. And the pedals play the bass sounds, usually, of the organ. They could be compared to the cellos, the double basses, the bassoons, the trombones of the orchestra, those instruments that tend to play the lower lines. The pedal can play upper pitches, melody lines, but usually its main role is to play the bass. So you'll notice that we have 4 keyboards, and these are on organ terminology. These are called manuals, from the old Latin word manus, for hand. These are played with the hands. So this is a 4-manual console. Each manual or keyboard is the home base, the home sort of neighborhood for a whole set of stops, a whole family of stops. And you can see that they're organized here, maybe you can see better on this side, in columns with labels at the top. So this says Swell, and these stops here are all the stops of the Swell division, and they happen to live on the 3rd keyboard up from the bottom here. So when I pull a stop here, the neighborhood next to it is the pedal neighborhood, so you know where they play. They play down in the feet, and so that's the pedal. On this side of the console, the middle panel is called the grate, and it's the main backbone tonally of the pipe organ, the grate division, and it plays on the 2nd keyboard up from the bottom. So just to give bottom keyboard is the choir division, and it's a more delicate division in terms of its sound, meant for accompanying. That's why it's called the choir division, I suppose. So a lot of medium and soft sounds. And the pipes of the choir division are located up over our head here in the chamber that exists between the chancel and the chapel. So a few sounds on the choir. There are some nice flutes on the choir. And lastly, we've ignored the top keyboard, which is always one of the more interesting ones. It's the home of the solo division, which is mostly a collection of solo type sounds, not meant to exist in families so much as to exist individually as beautiful, unique solo voices. So there's a big flute. There's what we call, in organ terminology, string tone. And there's some beautiful solo reeds. There's a clarinet. There's a French horn. And there's the tuba, which is the commanding voice on this organ. Dramatic voice. So that's an introduction to the keyboards, each of which exists as the home neighborhood for a whole ensemble of stops. And we'll talk about more detail in terms of the families and sounds of each neighborhood and each keyboard in subsequent videos. Other aspects of the organ console, though, we've talked about the stop knobs, which control sounds. Up here in the top, you see a row of tabs that just rock back and forth like this. So this is on, this is off. These are called couplers, and they couple the sounds from one keyboard to another keyboard, so you can mix and match at will. So this coupler says swell to great, and it takes the stops from the swell keyboard. And when I have this engaged, it makes them play on the great keyboard. On, off. So I could play that sound on the swell mixed with some sounds from the great. So these are couplers here at various pitches, and they couple the sounds from various keyboards to other keyboards in a lot of different combinations. These pedals down here at the bottom that look a little bit like great big gas pedals in a large-scale truck you might find. These control the swell shutters, and if you have good memories, you remember the swell shutters are up in the chambers, and they're like big wooden Venetian blinds that open and close, so they can make the sound louder or softer that way. So I'll show you how they work. This is open, and I'm going to close it gradually, and you'll hear the sound get softer gradually. Getting louder. Do that with a little different set of sounds. So the swell pedals open and close the swell shades, enabling the sound of the organ to get gradually louder and softer. These white buttons located underneath the keyboards are called pistons, and they can be set by the organist so they control any combination of stop knobs. So you can change the sound instantly by hitting one of these. So for instance, set one a little bigger here. So those are the pistons, and down here at the bottom, there are some silver pistons they do the same thing. They're duplicates. So if you see piston number 1 up here in the hands, that's duplicated by piston number 1 down here. Piston 11 is duplicated by piston 11 down here for the feet. Because very often in organ music, both hands are busy, but you want to change stops. So you can be playing along and I don't have that one set. So hang on, I can show you how that works. So if I'm playing, change. We had to wait for all these components to show up. They were ordered more than a year ago, but they're made by a specialty company in Los Angeles. And of course, California was greatly affected by the pandemic, and they had to remain closed for a great length of time this past year. So everything got backlogged. So we're thrilled to have these knobs, these beautiful silver pistons, these couplers. All these things just arrived a little over a week ago, and the Moeller Company installed them a week ago today and a week ago tomorrow. So finally, it's a little bit backwards from the way a lot of organs are installed. Very often the console shows up, and then the thousands of pounds of wind chests and pipes and reservoirs and wind lines that we've seen upstairs in the past weeks are gradually installed. We happen to do this just the other way around. All the big, heavy space-taking stuff was installed quite efficiently, and we had to wait for these little white knobs to show up from California. So we're in business now, finally, which is really a nice thing. So we'll talk in more detail in coming weeks, and I'll give you a little in-depth tour of each of the manual divisions, because there are many different sounds, and they exist in families, sort of the way orchestral tone does. So stay tuned in the next few weeks, and you can learn about each division in more depth. But that'll give you a little introduction to how the organ console functions.